hotel somewhere. But more importantly, he
As a VIP.
revealed his setup, which I don't know. Somehow we'll put it. We'll like put it in the show and maybe the after show or something. I'll include a picture of what has become. I guess it's the ironing board setup, right? Like that's kind of your go-to. Coté, like describe your process for remote recording for the streamers.
Well, first of all, to clarify, I'm using the patented software-defined talk casual setup, where I don't have here. Now that I'm not using my fancy
now you're making me feel bad. Does that imply we have a formal setup? Because we're in real trouble.
Let's see. Right here, I've just got. I'll take a picture of myself, and I'll use my my scrappy William Gibson, street finds its own usage technique. Like, see here, I'm just sitting at a desk.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're just back. Okay. Now you're back to very relaxed.
Now,
however, travel lighting. That's impressive.
Oh, well, yeah, that's called a desk lamp. But yes, I had a stream to record with the GM of my group, Purnima, and it was fun. And for that, I had to engineer something different. And so let me do the wide version of it. Yes, the ironing boards. Ironing boards are always an indispensable part of remote recording. So here, you can see what I've done is I have a couch.
Oh my goodness!
And I needed what I needed to do is I needed to get the camera right above the camera and the mic right above my my monitor, right? Because I'm moderating a discussion, so I got to know questions to ask, and people are texting you and stuff. So I needed to have the microphone above that, but it wasn't working out with the ice bucket that I was using and the plant pot that I liberated a plant from and turned upside down. And then I realized I went to the bathroom and I was like, "There's an ironing board here." Now the thing about an ironing board is it has variable height, right?
Absolutely.
And it has that overhang, so it's perfect for like a DIY mic stand. You can just you can bring it right over here and do that, and it was great.
A MacGyver of podcasting.
I think it sounded great. Well, listen, for everybody who's hearing this in the podcast, look at the show notes, or even if not, because there are multiple photos, maybe go to the Instagram account and you can see behind the scenes. I do think that you've discovered something. I think that's a best practice now. I think the ironing board, because the way you had it, you were showing me earlier, you did have it like collapse. It had basically the perfect height for your
because you can adjust it.
Microphone as well as your camera. So I was like, that's not a bad, and most. I'm going to say, well, I'd be corrected here, but I'm about to say most hotel rooms have ironing boards, but I don't know. Actually, sometimes the high-end ones don't, right? Because they want you to send you down for that $30 laundered shirt. Isn't that? So I don't know. I guess it depends on where you're staying.
Yeah. No, it's true. I have found a not a lot, but enough, a distressing amount of hotels don't have an ironing board. Like I brought a wrinkly shirt this time that I might wear, and I'm going to need to iron it. And now I can expense laundry according to VMware policy if I'm staying somewhere 5 days or more.
Oh,
so
that's
interesting. Nice policy. Yeah.
So to my fellow VMware travelers, if you're planning on staying 5 days or more, bring a bag.
It is kind of like a perverse incentive, though. It's like, but your shirt could be wrinkled for many reasons. You know what I mean? It's like the 5 day, like there isn't a connection between a wrinkled shirt and 5 days. It's like, well, it got wrinkled, or I don't know. I got to look good.
Or you just bring a whole bag of laundry from home.
That's what exactly.
That's true. Then you're just like, I'm going to be there 5 days, like pack an extra suitcase, send it all down. I don't like that's looking ahead.
That is like, at some point, all these little like expenses hacks, you got to figure add up. And, don't like, did I ever tell the story when I was, when we were backpacking in Europe, our first place was we went to London, and my friend Mason's dad, Barry, he knew, this is the kind of thing Barry knew. He just knew people, and he knew someone who was a music review journalist in London who he had met through a listserv in the 90s, an emailing list about the Tour de France. And so, of course, Mason and I went there, and Barry's dad was like, "Oh, my son and his friend are coming. You need to put them up." So this guy, I forget his name, but he picked us up. And he was totally fine. He was like most people who are journalists or write about stuff. Like he dressed cool, but you were like totally a nerd, right? Like, which is fine. Like here we are, right? And wow, there's so much I could say about this one guy. But what I wanted to get to is, he was basically a freelancer, and he was like, "Oh, when you go to the tube, this is before digital stuff. What you do is you just people will drop their tickets, and so you just scoop up a bunch of tickets and then you can expense all of those and make a little extra money on
Mm.
the side.
It feels like
And
it's
so,
edging
like-
up on a little bit of fraud, right? Like,
Exactly.
there's
And
kind
so
of the casual inflated expense, and then there's fraud. I don't know. I guess everyone has their own line.
No, I'm just saying, like, you know, that pops every time every annually I take the ethics and compliance thing. I'm like, yep, that sounds like a bunch of scooping up the tube tickets that you're doing there. And on the other hand, the other way of thinking about that is like that guy was paid so little that it was valuable to him to like expense like,
Yeah.
well,
It's
when
the
they
old,
say
like, I'm saving
50p,
I'm saving
like-
my per diem for extra money. It's like, well, something has gone wrong. So
Like,
that's true.
you know,
Yeah.
you take that per diem, you buy a jar of peanut butter, a jar of jelly, you got the
That's right,
whole
you
week
just
of
make it
food.
last. So
yeah.
Loaf
all
of
right,
bread.
well, it's good. That's exciting. So all right, we'll include a bunch of this in the post show. It'll be good. I think that'll
Oh,
be
also, before we start recording, I was thinking I need to give a Renaissance update because I'm staying at a Renaissance, and you know I have my theories.
No
and
swan.
I think first of all, there's kind of an atrium in this Renaissance, but not in American style. So I'm gonna give it to it. Definitely no swans, but I think it is kind of run down like an American Renaissance, but I feel like the Belgians have been keeping it in better shape. And also they did. I think I said this before the podcast. Someone came to my room after I checked in and brought me a bowl of fruit and this giant bottle of wine. Now I say giant because it's a regular size bottle of wine, but that's not common.
it's good for a hotel, right? Based on that. It's
Well,
not like
and for
menus.
one person, that's a bit much.
Yeah, and it's like, oof. So
Been a long
I'm
day.
thinking what I'm going to need to do is give that to some of my coworkers tomorrow because I can't envision that I'm going to have that much wine, really.
And you're not going to bring it home.
And I don't want to check my bag. I mean, come on, for a bottle of wine. I've done that for a nice bottle of champagne, but not for a bottle of wine. So,
All right.
Renaissance theory confirmed.
Run it. All
more or
right,
less.
I like it. All right, man. Well, we're ready to officially start whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, I'm here in Brussels now, and I've walked around. You could call it a block, but I've walked around the neighborhood a few times outside of my my Renaissance hotel here. Like, well, I think, well, we're in the neighborhood where the EU buildings are, which is kind of like, oh look, there's the EU, which is kind of an astonishing thing to realize. But it's the time of year where like all of the little restaurants and cafes, like there's outside seating. And when I went out for lunch around 11:30. There weren't that many people out. It seemed kind of like a ghost town, and I went to a lovely little Mediterranean place. But then when I walked around the block, so to speak, just before this episode, the sidewalks were crowded. There was with people. Like there was this one area, and it was just chock full of. It must have been 150, 200 people just having their Belgian beers and their wines, little burgers and snacks, and it seemed so nice. And like, you know, the whole time I was thinking like, that would be great to hang out, but like, you know, I got to go like give a keynote tomorrow morning. I can't just like drink a bunch of, how do you say it, left beer and wine. Like it seems like it takes a lot of effort to get out there in the streets and relax. Like you really got to like plan for it. And
Well, what's the story
order
with
your
buses? Is it like kind of, does it have like a Spain kind of like late start, like kind of late lunches,
Maybe,
late dinners, or was it just like where did you just hit the?
I just missed the window. I don't know. I walked around at like 9:15, and I'll tell you one thing: the Lidl was closed. I went up to the Lidl, the grocery store, expecting to. I just was like, I want to buy some fruit or something. It was closed. What grocery store closes at like 9?
I thought all the European ones did. I don't know. This is where I guess I get confused. Whenever I'm in Europe, things are always closed and open at like the times I don't expect. So
yeah, I mean,
maybe
I guess
that's
it's
the American perspective.
It's not that crazy to be closed at 9, but like in a city, it should be open by at least until 10.
No,
I think that's when my little grocery store is open.
No, everything in Australia closes early. Like, I mean, a lot of cafes, you know, they don't serve dinner. And then a lot of the grocery stores, they might close by like 7 or 8.
Wow.
Maybe 9. I don't know. There's one that I know of that stays open until 10.
I guess we're just so spoiled here in the US. I don't know.
Oh yeah. The US,
like
they want you to spend money anytime,
yeah, and it's
anywhere.
like so many places are open either 24 hours or the grocery store. I don't know. HEB is like, oh yeah, we're closing tonight at like midnight, and they close for like 2 hours. It's like, yeah, we're closed from midnight to 4 a.m. You're like, okay. I guess I'll sacrifice those shopping hours. So.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. That would be a good sociological study. Like, New York had this reputation of the city that never sleeps, and then New Orleans like is open all the time. But like comparative to the rest of the world, like most all of America is open a lot. Like, yeah, you can go to
Oh,
Walmart
absolutely.
24
Yeah.
hours a day, buy some like Velcro or something. Like, but in Europe, you'd be hard pressed to find like a 24-hour place. Like I wanted to buy a separate little tripod stand, and I was thinking like I can't really just like look up a Best Buy. Like I wonder where you
Well,
just
yeah.
find a place.
Here, the thing that bothers my wife is there are no 24-hour pharmacies, including
Oh,
the pharmacy in the hospital.
yeah. That
I mean,
is
so
kind of
there's one like there is one over in like North Sydney, but that's 30-minute drive. And like, how are there no 24-hour pharmacies? That's
Yeah,
just
well,
a weird thing.
That's
I
an
think-
interesting question, though. Like, I feel like even here in the U.S., right, the pharmacy inside most stores, like, it has its separate hours. I've always wondered that. Like, why
That's
does
fine,
one
but I mean,
area?
you
But
know,
like, why does the pharmacy get to carve itself out? They're like, nope, we're done at 9. Everybody else is like, no, we're done at like 8.
I'll tell you why. Because they have expensive employees.
The pharmacist was just like, I'm not going to be here.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know,
I mean, they have expensive employees, and so like if your margins are relatively tight and you have somebody who you can't pay minimum wage, a pharmacist.
don't the margins? Don't you think the margins on the pharmacy stuff is like the highest in the place? You're like, why wouldn't we just keep a pharmacist? It just seems like you would, right? Like,
I don't know. The prices are usually better than pharmacies. So
yeah, it's true. I don't know.
Yeah,
Well, the pharmacists, I guess, good for the pharmacists. I'm glad that they rallied to keep good
power to the
working hours.
people.
I think as I've covered here, maybe to end cap our note on pharmacies, is in the Netherlands, like the what we would call drugstores, like they seem to close at like 6 or 5, right? And as you were kind of alluding to, Matt, I think as a parent, your situation is like, yeah, but it's like 11 p.m. and I need like some medicine for this kid, right?
Earaches and stuff,
or just like the 50 pairs of scissors we have at my house, I now can't find one of the thermometers we have, right? Like,
exactly,
because it looked like an intriguing way to attach a piece of paper to a corkboard somewhere, or something. And like, so I think a 24-hour drugstore or pharmacy like that feels like a real backbone of society right there. That needs to be available.
Not here.
But I guess, as they're renowned for, the Australians just all plan ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
Definitely.
Well, speaking of planning ahead, now, as we've covered many times, what public companies like to do is provide guidance about what trends they're seeing and how things are going in the future. And now it looks like, I have to admit, I'm not a big reader of guidance, but it looks like maybe there's some indication that companies are not putting all of their data into the big data pool of Snowflake. And they're trying to, what's the phrasing we're using now, Matt Ray? They're trying to optimize their spend by maybe removing some data instead of like, I think what went over in a Snowflake call is that instead of storing 5 years of data, they're going to store 3 years. And then this one, I guess you have less storage costs. And then 2, less computational costs. So maybe they're trying to cut back on costs.
Well, remember that this is the perverse incentive of for Snowflake, because it's a consumption-based model. So when you have less data, your queries run faster, so people then pay less, right? So that's how Snowflake is going to charge you based on how often you're querying that data. So that's
people
sort of like
looked at their bills and said, why is it this expensive? How do I make it cheaper? And that's how.
Yeah, which I think it just in general is like and this is what I thought what was interesting about Snowflake. I guess we famously, and when I say famous, I mean not famous at all. We just mentioned it on the podcast. I think we gave Snowflake, we were down on the IPO. And of course, since then it's done extremely well, then it's done extremely bad. So who knows? I don't even know if it's up or down. But I think it's interesting to see that as being a bellwether in a company that most people think is, if you will, quote unquote, has like world-class operators, the former CEOs are, very well respected, that this whole idea of like consumption-based pricing is sort of like, that is interesting, I think, to itself. But I also think it just brings up this larger question around, big data just in general. And this idea that like, and this is where I thought it would be interesting for us to talk about is around, my perception is always like the enterprise data products, not just Snowflake, all of them it's very hard to get data out of them as like an employee at a company, right? So my kind of usage of it is always like, I'm always, if you will, sort of have to go to a different group to then ask for something that I want. And then normally it's a lot of back and forth, and they don't really make it easy for me to get it. Or if they do, like, I'll just say something like, this is kind of the running joke I know we've had on this podcast many times, like, export to CSV. Can you just give me an export of all the customers between this date and this date? Or, you know, this and this, because like someone's asking me to do some analysis, or I'm trying to look at some analysis of my product, but that big data interface either doesn't have it, it's not available to me, or I can't get a license to actually get it. So I always think it's like interesting, and I know Microsoft Fabric was announced last week, and we keep seeing over and over these launching of new big data platforms. But I feel like when you're actually in a large enterprise, it's like the last thing you want to have to do is to try to go get it from the big data service, because no one's going to give it to you. Now, I don't know if maybe that's just been my experience. I don't know, Coté, I think you've messed around a lot with Salesforce and tried to find analytics. Have you had a similar problem getting data, or what's going on with you?
I think at all of the large and all the companies I've worked at over the years, I think you're correct. And to break it down further, like, yeah, like you somehow, so if you're just going to go ask people to, like, as they say, pull data, then that's just, you might as well just, like, fold up your body into a small enough like tube that you can fit into a bottle, throw it in the ocean, and see if you get your data back at some point. Like, it just, like, it's not going to happen. And it'll happen sometimes, but the issue often comes down to explaining what you want, and like, like
Prompt engineering.
Yeah, like if I were to say, like, yeah, can you give me like all of the lead activity that happened globally for all of the pharmaceutical companies that we are interested in? Like, and if you were to like throw that at one of these data people, they would just be like, what? Like they just sort of like, oftentimes, and again, not always, but and when you meet someone who's not like this, it's always great. But you'll be asking for data from people, and it's just almost like they don't even really understand what you're asking, because you don't know how to ask it appropriately. And that's why you just want the CSV file to just like, because oftentimes this is my issue is like, I don't really know what I want. I just want access to everything, and I'll figure it out. And then the second problem that I end up having with, like, let's say the enterprise data thing is like, once you do get access to it, you're just like, who organized this, right? Like, what is all of this setup? And like, we have all these duplicative like data fields and things, and like, what does it all mean? Like, and there's no like, it's like inheriting a code base that's not documented, and you just kind of go in there and you're supposed to like figure it out. Like, there's no documentation of what this data model looked like. And then depending on, I've never used Snowflake, but you use Salesforce, and it's just like, Salesforce is just so weird, right? Like,
every Salesforce is a Snowflake. I mean, because everybody is using it in completely different ways. And there was somebody who was like, "This is how we're going to organize our data." And like, I know, a few companies back, we had a Salesforce engineer, and she said like every single one of them is just like a murder mystery, where it's totally set up differently, because somebody had a mental model in their head, and then it gets piled on as layers after layers of different VPs of sales come through with their different models that they want, and you end up with this big ball of horrid stuff. Well, not horrid, but I mean, the data's in there somewhere.
So there's definitely that, but there's even like just the software itself. Like, so I mess around with building reports in Salesforce. And so if you want to set the date range to like the last 7 days, now in this modern age, you think you would sort of like select something, right? Like there would be some interface, but no, what you do is in all caps, you type in last 7 days. On the face of it, on the face of it, that seems really nice that you just can like type the stuff in. But then what you have to do is you have to search around for the documentation. And this is an example of like, it's hard to ask for everything, right? Like, so what I want to find is, it's kind of like if you ever try to figure out like Apple shortcuts. Have you ever looked up documentation for Apple shortcuts? You might have tried to, but it doesn't exist. And so it's like, I want to, when I'm building a report in Salesforce, I want to be like, okay, as far as date range, I want to know every single thing I can put in there. And instead you go to the page and it's like, or you can use relative dates, like last 7 days, last quarter. And so you kind of like,
useful for a report, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You just sort of type stuff in there and see what works. And so one would think that given the context that you just went over there, Matt, that you've got this like layer upon layer of data models and reports and stuff, that like part of what the product people at Salesforce would be doing is to like accept that reality and be like, all right, what could we do to address that for some people? Like how, like maybe it would be possible that if you hover over a field name, it would pop up a description of it. Like all, like, now if people would do that or not, who knows? But it's sort of like, what is like the clean way of doing Salesforce stuff? And that's just Salesforce stuff. Like also in comparison, and then maybe this will get to my general theory of this stuff. But like if you've ever tried to use Google Analytics, and you use it in a way that, like, I don't know, however it is I think about using Google Analytics, it's obviously not designed for that at all, right? Like it's Google Analytics is designed to think about traffic in aggregate, not about like, tell me how many people went to this specific page and where they came from, right? Like you can get that report, but it's not like right there front and center. And so I think my theory would be that a lot of the big data stuff out there is that like the people who make it like don't really use it for like all these different scenarios. And so therefore, like, you probably need to do a lot of like user studies to make sure that like what you're doing kind of fits the way that people want to use it. And then finally, like, yeah, I mean, the ultimate problem that you started off with, Brian, who the hell is Brian? Oh, that other guy, Brandon, is like the vendor has to make money. And yeah. I don't think a vendor has figured out how to have like easy access be part of the benefit for it. Like in contrast, this isn't exactly
that's
true.
probably where they started, right? So yeah, I mean, with most late-term enterprise software, Salesforce is at the point where every product feature that's been requested has probably been checked off at this point, right?
Well, but hold on, while we're there, like I've got some I want to add to the list, because I think like this is what I observe as both just more the consumer side. It's like, one, it's very hard for me to get the access to the stuff that I want, and then by far the most common reporting I've seen in my career across many large companies is someone takes a screenshot of a report and puts it into PowerPoint, or some of them, and then they'll put some notes on it, right? That is by far and away the most common reporting thing that you see in meetings. Like, come at me if I'm wrong. Like, no one's just like, oh, let's just whip up, let's just look at the dashboard. Like, it's so rarely happened. It's always like somebody wants to see exactly what it is, and whether it's a QBR, an MBR, internal planning, whatever, right? Like there was this whole group of people that put it together in a PowerPoint because the systems are not either, there's not access to it, or it doesn't produce it in a way that's easy to see. And so that's like, to me, that's sort of like problem one. If you just were a Salesforce user researcher, you could just go watch and see this happen every day at millions of companies around the world. And then what you guys were getting at before was, I'll accept that like every company is different. Every company is going to want to model how they record customers, what the customers bought, their own way, their own sales process. So I'll accept that. That's just the way it is. That's not going to change it. But in my mind, what should be possible is for me to just go to my company's Salesforce, right? As an unlicensed person, right? Just give me if you will, some basic access, and let me, to what you were saying before, Coté, let me browse the data that's just available. Like, what tables do we have created? Like, is there a table of customers? Great. Did we record what industry they're in? Yes or no? I mean, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Maybe it's in a different table, right? Did we record what they actually bought? Did we record anything about what led them to becoming a customer? Like, I'm just simply asking, like, just let me see what you have, right? I don't need, and you can tell me that's all we have, and that's great. But if I have a way to then do it, because what I've found that I become better educated if eventually someone does give me an export and they're just sort of get annoyed with me and they're like, here's all the stuff, right? And they give you some weird CSV, and it will take a while. But if you kind of get good at like a tiny bit of Python or a tiny bit of Excel, you can clean up the data yourself, and then you will go in and almost kind of like teach yourself about the columns. You're like, oh, what does that mean? Oh, what does that mean, right? And then eventually you get enough knowledge that you can kind of, if you kind of create these backhanded, usually in Excel, right, is what people do. And then you cut and paste those into your decks, and then you can start to show your own stuff. And it's like, I get it. So maybe, getting to the point that like there'd be a Salesforce UI that made it all easy. I almost feel like that's too much to ask. But I just think like all these big data things, like let me browse the tables and schema, and anybody in the company should be able to do it, because we're all trying to figure out like what's going on and how to help customers and how to do it. But instead, what I find is it's all hidden away. Like you don't even know.
Well, and they're also charging by the seat. So
right. And they don't want to give you access to it. Go ahead,
right.
Matt.
Well, no. That's my point, is that, they're charging by the seat. So you as the casual user, somebody in finance is looking at like, how much are we paying for Brandon to look at this thing every other month? They're like, can't he just ask somebody? And so that's another perverse incentive, right? So, I mean, they're trying to keep you, because they've introduced this barrier, someone periodically was like, we got too many Salesforce seats.
Yeah. And what happens then, and again, like as someone that's asked for this, it's like there's eventually be some back channel where you eventually get to a Salesforce admin or someone, and you're just like, and what they'll do is they'll just dump everything out into CSV once a week in this one area. And then you can start to go off that, right? And again, like I don't think I'm breaking any news. I think this happened, and I don't know, like, and I feel the same thing with I don't want to pick on Salesforce because I think this is my whole point about all of them, just the collective enterprise data. It's like, if it's so great and we're all putting all this data in there, why can I never see the schemas? Why can I never get access to it? And then of course, like, and this is where everyone ends up doing these crazy Excel things. And that, I was looking online, it's like, it's amazing what Excel now does. And in Google Sheets too, we should throw that in. For example, Google Sheets, you can write SQL. You can literally write SQL in it, right? Excel, I've seen I'm sure I am one of millions of people. Like I've seen some gurus in Excel that have done some stuff that it's like amazing, right? You're like, I don't know. There's like a JDBC driver into this system that pulls data into this, and it does. And it's just like, it becomes this weird reporting thing. And it's like, it's great that people can do all of that, but it's sort of like, it's not what we really want. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's like, show me what data you have, make it easy for me to get access to it, or give me some tools. And if it's Excel or something else, right, or Python or, whatever, that's fine. But like, again, it's kind of this repeated promise of quote, big data. And this is something that we hit on with the interview, I think a few weeks ago with Jordan over at, he was talking about DuckDB and things like that. This idea that like, big data is everywhere. It's like, really, actually, it's small data, right? When I think about like, and I'd be interested in what you guys think. It's like, I really, like, I don't know, maybe the company has 10,000 customers, maybe it has 20,000, but this is trivial. That trivial amount of data to like put on a laptop and like do stuff with. So this idea that like people keep shoving stuff in these big data stores, hiding it away and making it very difficult to get to. Meanwhile, what everyone's trying to do is export it into some CSV, do some Python and some Excel. And it's just like, yeah, it just feels like it's all wrong to me. And so this is why I guess maybe, the take on Snowflake and all these companies going forward is just like, I don't know, like, I guess someone's getting a lot of value out of them, but man, it sure seems like it doesn't penetrate the rank and file employees.
Yeah. There's not enough seats to go around. You got to, well, being able to use SQL in a database, in a spreadsheet would be fantastic, because then you wouldn't have to figure out all these weird VS lookup things and strange scripting. That would be
well, definitely. I'll put a link in here to the example for Google Sheets. And I also wanted to say, there's this company that we didn't really talk about. I think it's called Neptine. And what they have done is they've basically taken Python and put it inside a spreadsheet looking thing. And so to your point, like, oh, like that way you don't like, because just what you're saying, Coté, it's like, you can do all this like V lookup, match, you know, and things like that. And it's like, it's incredible when people do it in Excel. And you're like, or we could just like take a tiny bit of programming and this would be like a million times easier. So that's kind of like where these tools could go. It's just like, fine, if you're not going to give me access to this tool, like give me a tool, or like, you know, and this is where Excel, I think, just continues to grow. It's just like, but could we get out of like everything has to be inside a cell? You know what I mean? Could we like abstract a little bit of programming somewhere else that's very accessible to everyone else, so that when we just want to like replace a few characters in a column, it's not like you have this crazy looking cell formula that no one understands. So I don't know. All of that needs to be fixed, in my opinion.
You know, I think maybe a good use for this crazy AI stuff that's going around, right? Like, it'd be fun to like give it access to your wacky like Salesforce, your big data thing. And like the first thing I would want, not the first thing, but like in this conversation, I would want to ask it, I would want to say like, just like give me a normal view. Like whatever industry standard, like normal view of this stuff is, never mind all the specialization. Like, because that's the other thing with like a bunch of specialized, especially like sales data stuff, is like, so have you invented a new way to sell things to people? Probably not. Like, you probably always like all of the reporting, like, you know, it's one of the 20 different ways that you would think about like selling stuff to people. So really, you don't really need a customized thing. Like, just here's just like the normal way you would track stuff. And
undoubtedly, you know, somebody is either pitching a Salesforce plugin, you know, based on AI, or, you know, they've already pitched it and raised funding for a Salesforce competitor to do that. Right. I mean,
well, before we get to that, I just want to throw out one thing before someone, and I'm all in favor of the AI thing, but like, you know, I think, Matt, you said it before. It's like, look at the licensing at Salesforce. It's licensed by seat. So it's usually hard to get a seat. People say they don't want it. And then who has the seats? All the salespeople. Generally speaking, the salespeople are one of your highest paid sets of employees, right? And then what you want is when someone actually updates Salesforce, they put in all the information about the client opportunity, what's going on, and they make sure it's meticulously accurate, because it's going to serve as the basis of, if you will, what the company knows about the customers going forward. And I can say unequivocally, salespeople will not do any of that. They absolutely will not do any of that. So what you end up seeing is then later on, you'll see a Salesforce record, and you personally may know information about the client. You'll be like, oh, that's actually wrong. Like, I actually know something, right? And there'll be tons of people in the company that also know things about it, but they won't have a license, right, to get it. So back to like, you know, all of these systems, it's like, what if you had like a mindset of like Wikipedia or whatever? It's like, I want everyone to be able to update information about the customer and just annotate it, right? Like, Brandon said this, Brandon said that. Because I do this all the time. I'll get off, and I'm talking to a customer about a specific area, and I'll get a lot of information about one area, and it's just like lost in email, right? But it would be great if I could be like, you know what? I'm going to want to remember this, and let me go annotate it in Salesforce, and everyone could see it. And then later, Matt, we may bring in you, and you may be a different product line or have a different interaction. And it's like, yeah, Matt, you're going to want to remember that. And we all start updating that. But it's like Salesforce is all about, no, stay away from it. We're not going to give you access to it. We're not going to like let you update anything like that. So it's like, yeah, the AI system, fantastic. Love it. Right. Before we get to that, though, it's like, what if we just let everyone update it and think of the mindset of like, by default, we're open. We want to collect more information. And then we add, Matt, your AI system that you were describing before.
We should, I don't know when they have their conference, Dreamforce, but I think we need to have a panel there. We need to pitch like a panel that's sort of like, you know, well, the what if, right? Like, you know,
here's the title for the panel is Salesforce. What Salesforce should do from 3 guys who don't have seats.
Yeah, that's it. Beyond per seat licensing. That's you know, it can be the strap line for it.
Well, I do. Maybe just like kind of as we kind of wind down this topic, I think the one place for all of these are going, whether it's Snowflake or Salesforce, is that, you know, kind of to what Matt's saying, telling us all now, we need to optimize our spend, right? And I think these companies in the SaaS multiples are feeling a lot of contraction, right? And people are looking for ways not to use the SaaS systems as much. And I think this idea, this, you know, if you will, gatekeeping mindset, right, through licensing, I think is really limiting a lot of these companies going forward. And that's what, you know, kind of like Snowflake, it would be interesting, you know, 5 or 10 years. It's just like, I don't know, like, if you adopt a more open mindset now, is that going to lead to much more growth, if you will, versus like, hey, just as more and more data gets exported out of Snowflake, now they're going to go from 5 years of data to 3 years of data to maybe just 1 year of data, right? And that will,
3 years of data and only 5 users. And so, as you start to, drop the number of people touching it, then fewer people depend on it day to day, and fewer people are going to fight to keep it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess it's just creating champions. Like, right now, I guess I would say I'm the opposite of all these systems, like, because they just keep me out. They don't like me. It's like trying to get into an exclusive club. It's like no one ever lets me into the data club or the Salesforce club, and I'm always just kind of bitter about it. So it's like I don't like these systems. I'm always like, hey, what else can we use? So it'd be great though if I walked into every place. I'm like, oh yeah, like first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to browse all the Salesforce data so I can figure out what's going on with the things I'm responsible for. But I never think that. I always think to myself, like, who do I got to find to give me that export to CSV?
I know the name of the panel should be, why can't I use Salesforce?
It would be good. Or all of them together. I'm happy to complain about all of them, whether it's Snowflake, Salesforce, Microsoft Fabric. I don't know. There's probably a million systems on the financial system, which I know I'll never get access to that one. That one, there's just
there's that, right? Governance or regulation or something, and he's just like, I don't have time for that.
Middle management is all about like, hey, your goals are to make more money. We're never going to tell you how you're doing till the end of the year, and then we're just going to be mad that you didn't do it. Like that's always the way it is. You weren't looking at this number. You didn't know exactly what was going on. I can't believe it. I can't believe you didn't do it better. But anyway, that's a rant for another day.
Well, just as a slight tech update before our next topic, it looks like we talked at length, I think, about New Relic last episode. It looks like they're not going to be acquired. Francisco Partners and TPG. I forget what TPG stands for. But I think the quote was, they failed to secure enough debt financing and could not meet the business software company's valuation expectations, people familiar with the matter said. I like to comment on this.
Which is like people from TPG, like, which is literally, the people that were trying to do the deal.
And then at some point also in the article, it says, the source did not want to use their name because they wanted to remain confidential. It's like, yes, thank you. I know how journalism works. Good. Thanks for including that.
This is a good marker, though. It's a fun one for us to watch because it's like, I don't know. I think of it more like New Relic got a reprieve. So we can almost say, okay, May 31st, 2023.
There's blood in the water, right?
In 5 years, like one of two ways. It's like one, like, hey, they got the pass and they're going to go on and like, they're going to put in place the strategic roadmap to like beat Datadog and it's going to work. And they're going to be worth $30 billion and they're going to be geniuses for not taking the money. Or they slowly don't make progress and the revenue goes down and they get a lower multiple the next time TPG or Vista or somebody shows up. So I don't know. Make your bets now, whatever you believe in New Relic.
And so then back out of the tech world into the exciting world of white collar office work. So, I have to apologize. I don't either never learned or don't remember how to pronounce her last name. But Erica, who was at GitHub for a while, and she worked at Bitnami at some point, right?
Yes,
wasn't she like the CEO there? Yeah.
Sold it off.
So she shared a like a weekly status memo format that they used, which it's it basically. We'll put a link to it. It has like things that you did it's very engineer driven, like things that you shipped or output that you've had, like how your OKRs have done, like what's up with your people, your talent, like any sort of like meeting topics that are coming up, like events that you're having. And then like basically sharing like, as it says, story time, like an event that happened. And then the asks that you would have, which is a very like scrummy sort of thing to like, ask something at the end. I don't know. Scrum is very like 2003, so who knows how it's evolved. But the idea is that, of course, being an engineering type of company, you kind of automate that. I think what she was saying, that there's like you can actually just type in somewhere, the snippets command to get it pop.
Right, and they were using GitHub, right? So basically, they open a pull request, and then everybody is given a set of prompts, and then they enter the information, and then they can. If you will, submit it to GitHub. So the one thing I thought was interesting about it is like they did use GitHub because they are GitHub and they're using GitHub, which is always interesting to see and a good idea for companies to use your own products. So that part was interesting. But go on, Coté. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, and then I think the point of that is that it's in theory quick to do, and you can not only bubble up, but you can bubble in all directions. Like, I assume this is hopefully the opposite of what we were just discussing. Is now you have like more access to all this stuff. You can probably read as many status updates as you have time to read, and wade through and sort through. And the point being that, like, not only is it good to share information, but it also hopefully precludes a lot of like just status meetings where you go over this stuff, which I think, that's always the dream, right? This meeting could have just been an email, or, and then furthermore, this email could have just not existed. Is
email could have been a PR.
Like what's nice. And so, I remember, I've encountered such things, and it sounds like it worked out for them. But if we were to generalize it, like what's y'all's take on the automated, like, let's replace the status meeting with a standardized, like, status report that people can have and use?
Well, I guess a couple things that really jumped out at me. Like, I guess a couple things. One, I like when people post kind of the details of how they work. I just in general think it's kind of interesting. Now, having said that, the first thing that jumped out at me was that basically, you're supposed to do this at the end of the week, and you're supposed to have all your updates in by Sunday afternoon. So, like, I guess it is what it is. It definitely sends like a cultural message out. And I have to just be honest, like, the idea of like writing just in general status updates is not enjoyable to me. But then having to do it every Sunday afternoon would just be, I don't know. It's a pretty miserable existence, in my opinion. So maybe that's just my thing. I guess it's okay.
That's true. We could change that and just say, like, it's due Friday at 3 p.m.
Right. But I think this is the part I guess I would go further with, was like, I think they've automated getting the status in. But like, my question would be on this whole thing is like, why do we have to do written status updates at all? And I think because the thing that I thought was really interesting about it was sort of like the phrase that in her memo, I guess, uses like key ships. What are your key ships this week? And I guess, I like to flip that around and be like, as a large company, and certainly an organization like this, it's like, I think that stuff should be well known ahead of time. And if it isn't, like, if I'm just telling you right now that if I'm the VP of engineering or product or marketing, and I'm like, well, the key ship this week was XYZ. Like, I think you should already know about it, especially if we spent time doing our OKRs and we have a plan, right? That, things about like, if we think about it to kind of our reporting thing, it's not that different from company to company. It's like product's going to have a roadmap and a set of deliverables to deliver, updates to the product. Marketing is going to have a set of campaigns, and campaigns driving different activities, right? Sales is we just went over it. An entire product devoted to Salesforce, showing the status of Salesforce and updates around that. So the fact that like the COO in this case was like, we need you to sit down and write that all down, right? We want you to I want you to summarize that, versus could you not, like, all of those things map very well to dashboards, and because they're GitHub, it seems like they would match very well to like GitHub projects. Like, if everything that you care about, you should be thinking about ahead of time, you should probably have some type of dashboard, or in this case, GitHub projects. And it should almost just be self-documenting as the team, kind of using the Scrum metaphor, as tasks get completed and status gets updated, the team, because they're using it to monitor themselves, are updating those dashboards. And so it kind of gets to the point of like, why do we have to have all this status stuff anyway? And it's sort of like, and I think she had some acronym for the executive leadership team in there. I can't remember, we hear a lot of these, like E staff, S team. I think theirs was something with O's in it. And it's always like, how does the company view that group of people? Like, are they a customer where data needs to be fed? Are they an active group of people involved in the day-to-day that have thought about what they need to see and how they're going to monitor it without having to talk to everyone, right? Without having to look at these status updates. So that was my biggest thing. It was like, it just feels like there's a ton of automation to kind of do there. And then finally, it kind of gets into this whole idea about, it depends on like what kind of culture you're in. Are you in a high trust culture or a low trust culture? But like, anytime there's like the opportunity where everyone has to answer the same set of prompts, I think there's going to be pressure for everyone to write. It's almost like an essay test you get in high school. It's like, I can't leave this blank. I got to write down a few sentences no matter what. Even if I don't know anything, I got to like put some kind of prose down to show that I care about this question. And I feel like a lot of times, and especially in offices and works, like there may not be anything interesting to say to the whole group at that point. And then you're just kind of writing to write, right? And it's like, are you in a culture where you can just say, like, yeah, everything's, current course and speed. I don't have any updates from last week. It just feels like that's not going to be well received, or you're not going to feel very comfortable writing that. So then you end up with like lots of people writing stuff and saying stuff that maybe they wouldn't even bother with in a different culture. So I don't know, those are things that jumped out at me. Matt, what do you think?
Well, yeah, my current organization, I'm on a pretty small team. It's a Google Doc, copy paste last week, update the fields, add a few sentences. Pretty much a lot of the things you said are applicable. You feel like, well, I definitely need to put something here to make it look like something's changed, but it's it doesn't really bother me, because I know like my boss is getting asked questions about, at the next level up, like, hey, what's everybody doing? And he needs to be able to have just some shorthand. But yeah, I'm glad there's not more process to it, but also when to hear you describe, a lot of people's work at it, I'm like, oh my God, this is the sort of toil that, Chat GPT is good at. Is you're just like, okay, here are the things I do. Can you just fill out the next 8 weeks of work and make every week sound slightly different, and fill out this template, and
right. But I think I think what you're kind of getting at, and I think this is the part that really jumps out at me, is like, yeah, like you're going to like, maybe you will put it through Chat GPT, like you write a few billets and then you want it to sound good and things like that. And then it's just like, but like, I don't want to pick on any one thing, but like, I just think like, we know you're running an open source project. Like we know, like I could sit down with you and you probably have your own metrics and things that you're monitoring yourself. And it's like, that just seems like where the meaningful work would be like, hey, let's figure out what we all want to know about this going forward. And then let's just look at this. And then it's like, yeah, I don't need to go ask Matt. I need to go look at this and see what's happening. Now I may come and ask you, Matt, be like, hey, looks like we're ahead of schedule. It's just whatever, pick whatever you want. We're ahead of schedule. We're behind schedule. Or like the revenue number, that's always going to be a conversation. We're above plan. We're below plan. Then we're going to have a meaningful conversation about like why things either are or are not going well. And that seems like useful. The fact that you have to write all of this down. And I just think that's like, to me, leadership is really like, I've thought through the things that I want to know about this business and if it's performing well. And I found a way to instrument it, just like coding, just like all the things we talk about. Like I will implement the log monitoring along the way in the application so that when something goes wrong, I can go see it and see what happens, right? And I don't think running a company is that different, or a coaching player metaphor. Like nobody goes to like a basketball player in the NBA playoffs and is like, tell me what you did last week. Like the coach isn't like, they're like, no, they go look. They're like, we watched the game tape. I have a lot of statistics. I see if we won or lost. Or using a different metaphor, like an orchestra and somebody plays an instrument. And I'm like, hey, tell me what you do, violin player. Like, I know what you do. I can either hear you're playing well or you're not playing well or something like that. And it's like, I just think like when executives and people kind of push this out, they're sort of like pushing out responsibility, right? Like you need to think about what you need to see to run the business. And if you haven't done that, don't like just push out a lot of status updates. You're really, if you will, kind of just giving up on a lot of your responsibilities. Maybe that's too strong, Coté. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think what to rephrase a little bit, like what you were saying there, is, I guess if you're management and executives, at some point you do have to like go to the staff and be like, hey, here's what I need you to tell me so that I can do my job, right? Like I need this information about what's going on, because to do whatever my job might be, whether it's like, investigating things that aren't going well, making decisions about stuff, deciding like new strategic directions, whatever it may be. Like management does all sorts of things. And so, in that way, it like, people are weird about like status meetings and bubbling status up. But maybe if managers are more like, hey, I got a job to do, and if I don't have these inputs, like I can't do the job. So could you give me the inputs? Right. Like it's a little bit of like,
I think what you're going, that's the next part of where we go. It's like, let's do that at the beginning. Like, for example,
right.
HR, and what I'm saying? Like HR, it's like, I need to see every week, like how many people we're hiring, what's the candidate pipeline. And then HR should be like, hey, I'm going to build here's a dashboard. You can look at it all day long, anytime you want.
So that's exactly the second thing I was going to get to, is and this connects together everything we've been talking about, is there's a certain thought exercise you could go through in these big companies and be like, what if we froze dashboard development and report development as it is now, and we forced ourselves to use all those dashboards and reports for the next 3 months? And like we actually, like, we have all these dashboards, so like whatever OKR monitoring tool we have or management tool, there's a bunch of them. Like, does anyone ever actually log in to the dashboard and look at it? Or like, do you only get that Brandon style cut it and paste into a PowerPoint that you look at? And like, I guess you wouldn't even have to do it. Like, I mean, this would be impossible to get, but in theory, you could just see if you could do like, use your Google Analytics or the equivalent and see if people actually look at the dashboard and who's looking at it. And like, so it would kind of suss out like everything has a dashboard and everything can generate reports. And like, why aren't we just using those? And if we're not using them, then maybe we should make a dashboard that we want to use or something like that. But like you're saying, you know, you want to you need to instrument the organization. And but you know, it may not be the most efficient, but it always seems like the easiest, often quickest way is just to like get all the meatware people to just like type stuff up, right? And then, as you were talking about earlier, the problem becomes consuming all that information, right? It doesn't like, that's hard.
Well, I think it's consuming, and I also think it just ends up like it's an exercise in you editing, because it's back to like, hey, no one's going to go to the meeting and be like, I don't have any key ships for the week. Like, you just don't, like, or you're going to feel bad about it.
You're going to come up with something.
Because normally the way, you know, all of us have been in a million of these executive meetings, but like, you know, normally what it is, like, people go around and be like, okay, Coté, you know, give me an update. And it's like, you're not like, you're going to feel compelled to talk for 5 or 10 minutes, right? And you're going to feel compelled to like, it's just natural to be like, things are going well. I have command of what's going on. Like, you know, and it's just like, but if I just was asking you like in the hallway, you'd be like, yeah, things are fine. Like, you know what I mean? You wouldn't waste the time, but it's like, no, we're having a meeting. Yeah, hiring's going great. Like, every update is the same. It's always like, X is going great. You sandwich in a tiny bit of friction, right? I'd be like, well, this one thing could be a little bit better. And then you end on a high note, like, but you know what we're doing? We're working on that thing I just mentioned, and we're about to fix that. Versus like, you know, then you go out to lunch and you're like, shit, man, things are going bad. I don't know what the hell we're going to do. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, I just talked to so-and-so in engineering and like, they have no idea how they're going to fix that bug. Right. I mean, or whatever, or the sales thing is like, yeah, no, we just got back from that sales meeting. It's like, I don't think they're going to buy. I don't know what I'm going to put in Salesforce. Right. You know, like all those conversations are pushed to the side, and it's sort of like the status update, I think, prevents it all. So I'd like to see, like, you know, more, because again, like if you really wanted to have that information, have the dashboards and then go have the one-on-one, be like, hey, looks like we're not doing well on this year, on this quarter's revenue. What's really going on? And have a one-on-one where the person has a chance to kind of level with you, right? In the big executive boardroom, no one wants to have the spotlight. No one wants to be like, oh man, the sales is going, you know, you're going to work not to have that kind of spotlight.
Yeah. I think maybe the final thing here is I'm always also a big believer in like any template that you have that people actually use is probably better than the whole bunch of nothing that you're currently doing, right? Like there's probably some whatever thinking fast, thinking slow thing that's sort of like whenever people apply a new tool or idea and they see a huge improvement, oftentimes it's because they were doing nothing before.
Yeah, and to add something, you know,
an improvement.
And to Erica's credit here, like she put it out there, right? Like, here's what we do.
Yeah,
here's how we do it. Like it, don't like it. You know, obviously we've had a whole discussion about it, and it's like that is a lot more meaningful than just being like, oh, we just, you know, some abstract statement. You know, when I was the GitHub COO, everything just ran great and it was great and we were super efficient. Like, oh no, this is actually kind of interesting to see. And like to your point, like I don't know, what I would love to know going forward is like, I know she's left there. It'd be interesting to see now that she's gone. Like, what did they change, if anything, right? Because that would be kind of interesting, right? Because that would kind of give you an indication of like either what wasn't working or what people wanted to change. So I don't know. I want to see more of this stuff because I just like to, you know, I just want to learn, and it is kind of interesting to see how other people do it.
Yeah, it's the actual tools being used, not just the benefits and the outcomes that are achieved. Well, there's a few more items that we didn't go over, but if you want to see, you want to click around on those, read them, try them out. See how what the mouthfeel is as you roll it around, stare at it in the you know, that someone might have brought you a big bottle of wine at your hotel room and you're like, what do I do with this? So you could hold it up to the light, like what was that movie, American Treasure with Nicolas Cage? You could use it as a magnifying glass for things. You could go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/417 and peruse all of those other links and those things out there. Do we have any bureaucracy this episode, Brandon?
Well, if you would like a sticker, as always, just email your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com. I'll be happy to send you stickers anywhere in the world. And just one thing from the nonsense, HP looking to become a legacy comp sponsor of some kind. And I think I want them to give away this 40-year-old calculator again. So I don't know if everyone saw this calculator in their youth. Maybe your parent had it, but it's sort of like, I don't know, the financial calculator that
I remember
I feel
that
like was everywhere. Like I want to say everyone's parent, but like maybe I'm just too old. Maybe it's your grandparent, which will make me feel even worse. So I just thought it was funny. So yeah. So not only that, it's just funny. It's $120. It's like, well, yeah, get yourself a used iPad or a 40-year-old calculator, whatever you want. So it's good. It was nice. So good job, HP, for keeping that thing around, at least in some format. I appreciate that.
I wonder if it actually like cost them, like $20 or $50 to make it, such that they need to charge $120 per unit or something. Like what? It's got to be something you can just like stamp out. Like, I don't know. Can't you like 3D print that or something?
I don't know. They probably had to like wake up some like very old manufacturing arm in some like fab somewhere, and they're like, "Oh, we haven't used this in like 30 years." Like,
there needs to be a teardown. I bet it's all new. I bet it's all new insides, and it costs like less than $5.
Nothing. It's like on a chip that costs like 25 cents.
Oh yeah, it's full of iPhones.
Yeah, I like it though. It's fun to see.
Well, yeah. Somebody in the comments just said it's probably got a Pi inside. If it was a Raspberry Pi, it cost like $200.
It's true. Those are hard to get, as we found, right? I sold one the other day, and I was like, "Wow, those are hard to get still."
Huh. Well, there's several conferences coming up tomorrow. If you're watching the live stream and you happen to be in Brussels, I'm going to be giving the opening keynote at the VMware User Group Brussels. It's free to attend, so you should come if you hear it. And also, there's a Platform Con is next week. There's lots of presentations. There was a good if you're interested in that, over on the Cloudcast, there was an interview with one of the people there where they talk about that. It's especially if you're in the business, as it were, the tech business of marketing and stuff. There's a good part at the end where Brian asked, I think it was Luca who was on there. He asked him just to kind of go over the ins and outs of doing it. And there's some interesting commentary on doing conferences and things to work on there. Also, DevOps Days Amsterdam is June 22nd and 23rd. There's FinOps X in San Diego. What does the X stand for, Matt Ray?
That's a good question.
Experience. Let's go with experience.
It's a multiplier.
Or extreme. It's usually either
there you go.
Extreme or experience, whichever one you want to say.
You could find out June 27th to 30th in San Diego. What does the X in FinOps X mean? We'll be there as well. There's also August 8th, Kubernetes Community Day in Australia. I think Matt Ray will be there. Maybe he'll bring you some directions to the 24-hour pharmacy in case you need anything.
Good luck.
And then August 21st and 24th is going to be Spring One and VMware Explorer, which is that's pretty soon. Someone just reminded me that's about 2 months into the future, which is crazy. That's the fall is almost here. The summer's going to be short, and then it's mosquitoes everywhere. All right. Well, on that note, what do you have to recommend this week, Brandon?
My recommendation is more of a follow-up this week. So I would just again, for the 5 people that listen to this podcast and also watch the NFL. So I complained, I don't know, maybe relentlessly, maybe not, but that YouTube was going to limit the number of NFL Sunday ticket streams. So I said, hey, warning, don't, if you buy it, know it. But they have come to their senses. I feel like this is the one place I could really help YouTube. Just call me with the ideas before you launch them. But they have come to their senses. They are now going to allow unlimited simultaneous streams of the NFL Sunday ticket from your designated home location. So I'm happy. Glad they're doing it. I guess all good product marketing, just announce a bad decision and then let everyone get mad and then take it back. And then everyone's happy and, you get some goodwill. So I guess I'll take it. I will say YouTube TV, it's I've been back and forth. This was going to be real disappointing, but the conversion, I would say so far it's worked out pretty well. And I'm hopeful that they've not only with the unlimited Sunday ticket streams, that it's all going to work really well in the fall. So YouTube, thank you for applying common sense to your decisions. I appreciate it.
So I noticed in that reading of it, I guess that's only for individuals at their homes to use, right? Is there a whole parallel universe that bars and restaurants buy from if they want to
Yeah,
show
so
like
if you
all
want
the
to get
essentials?
into the whole detail, so what the NFL did was, and probably rightfully so, they the bars and restaurants are not ready to go to a streaming service, so they withheld the commercial rights, as they call them, bars and restaurants, and they're going to still be served through the old school traditional DirecTV way of doing it, right?
I see.
And then YouTube, which seems fair, this seems fair, is that they are going to limit you to like 2 streams outside your house. So it's kind of weird. It's sort of like it's like a cable artifact, right? Like we could watch all the TV if we're at like a certain place that we designate our home, which I guess I'm used to, so I don't necessarily reject it. And then you're limited when you go outside your house. But of course, if we were designing the system from the ground up, we'd be like, doesn't matter. Like you're just on the internet somewhere, right? But
yeah,
but it is what it is. You know, the United States. I don't know if this applies. I don't know if you guys are having the same crazy, cord cutting cable bundle madness that exists within the US. Is like everything gets rebundled and then bundled again. And, it's all going to be confusing for the next 5 years. And we'll probably end up close to where we went before, but now we'll at least have streaming boxes instead of cable boxes.
Sounds delightful. Well, and also the geofencing, that might be problematic if you have like a big ranch, right? Like, I just ran that Ethernet out to the back 40. And now it thinks I'm not at home, so I can't watch all the games.
It's funny though, Coté. I know you didn't mean it, but like if you ran Ethernet, you're probably fine because it's all going to look like one IP address, and you're not going to let. Now, if you went,
okay,
Wi-Fi extender or a geolocated something on your, then you'd probably have to be like, just how big is the homestead
when
the
probably
location monitoring hits?
And you're probably on satellite out on your ranch.
Yeah. Well, you're screwed then. You don't get because that's the people that got screwed. If you're on a ranch, you don't have internet, and you like the NFL, they just took it all away from you. They're like, nope, you don't
Poor
get
Cowboys and Broncos.
You don't. You just get regular over the air. And I do think it's funny after all of this is like over the air television becomes more and more in vogue, right? As like more and more things go to streaming, you're like, oh, I want to watch this in real time with really high quality. What's the best way to do it? Turns out the antenna. Probably the antenna is the best way to do it right this second.
Yeah. Well, how about yourself, Matt Ray? When you're installing that antenna on the roof of your house and you need a break, what's something you would recommend to people?
I've been listening to not new music lately. And one of the things I've noticed on Spotify is all the like remastered 20th anniversary album versions are always on there. So if there's something you're listening to from back in the day, they probably have like, the remastered, the special extra edition with all the remixes. A couple examples were Cure's Disintegration. They've got the deluxe edition, and Underworld's Second Toughest in the Infants. They've got a 5 CD edition. So make sure you'll have plenty to listen to when you're working on your roof or, wiring cable or whatever.
To the back 40.
To the back 40.
Well, my recommendation also from the YouTube world. I forget where I came across this. I think it was that waxy.org guy. But there's this YouTube channel where there's this Irish guy named Bobby Fingers, and he's like somewhat anonymous, but there's 3 videos, and he builds very intricate, realistic looking diagrams of the following. He has a diagram of the time that Steven Seagal was beaten in a fight with a stuntman and allegedly pooped his pants. And then he has a diagram of Mel Gibson being pulled over for a DUI driving and lecturing a cop. And then the best one so far is he's got a diagram of when Michael Jackson's hair caught on fire during the Pepsi commercial. And like they're each like maybe 20, 15 minutes, and it's like extremely high quality. Like, and it's just amazing to watch this person make these. But what makes them especially, like, I would not be interested in that, but he's got a great narration. And I think as it was originally described on the site that I found, just as the video goes on, he gets slightly more unhinged and just weird, and makes all sorts of side notes. And so it's got a good, it's not just like, so I took the clay and did this, but he like tells you stories about his life and weird things and like all sorts of stuff. If you only watch one, the Michael Jackson one is definitely the best.
All right, I'll start there.
It's I might even go watch it like a third time after this.
My gosh.
There's a lot going for it. And then the kicker is at the end, he buries them and hidden in the video somewhere are the GPS locations, and you can go get them for yourself. But they're very well made.
I like it.
Speaking of getting things for yourself, you've just gotten yourself another fine episode of Software Defined Talk. If you want to subscribe to this and you're not already, thanks for listening this far. Just search around for Software Defined Talk and however you do your podcast stuff. You might want to put that in your status meeting. Tell some of your staff, find the Software Defined Talk and subscribe me to it, so I can do it on the Ethernet with my multiple channels or whatever. But if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com, you can find out how to watch us live stream it. You should join the Slack channel. We've got all sorts of great conversations going there all the time. And, that's the show. We'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, another fine episode. Thanks for all the people joining us in the stream. Yeah, Michael, I don't know how to help you, man. Multiple IPs in your house. That's not going to help your streaming situation. I don't know. Can't do that. I don't know. You have to route them all through one IP. That'd be the only thing.
Yep. That.
All right. Well, thanks for everyone hanging in here on the stream this week. Appreciate it. I think we straightened out our summer hours. So without any major changes, we will hopefully be back next week at hopefully around this time. So we'll talk to y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.